Okay, well, there, a nice little tension breaker. um, is anybody else? Emma, do you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, and it's okay if I have my notes up?
Absolutely. Do whatever you need to do.
Okay. 48,344. That's 32 times the amount of people who died on the Titanic. 48,344, 16 times more than the amount of people who passed away on 9/11. 48,344. That's the number of people who lost their lives to suicide in the United States in 2018. That's a life lost every 10 minutes of every single day. Hi, my name is Emma Carpenter. I'm a sophomore with Home Life Academy. I want to take a minute to raise awareness, decrease the stigma, and support research that will help identify and treat people suffering from mental illnesses with the ultimate goal of lowering these numbers. Suicide is the third leading cause of death for people within the ages of 10 to 19. For every person who dies by suicide, there are 25 more suicide attempts. Teens may have suicidal thoughts due to being bullied, trauma, or depression. There are so many different reasons as to why one might consider suicide. But no, others have felt just like you. There is help. There is hope. Suicide takes away our identity, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to become just another number, another statistic. We can't let our unique selves disappear. Even if we don't trust that anything will ever get better or will ever change, we must keep going. If we truly want things to get better, if we wish for change, then we can't stop fighting. We have to fight for those dreams to make them a reality. We have the power to say, this is not how our story will end. I'm here to ask, no, beg. I'm here to beg you to realize that suicide is not the answer. It's not the easy way out. Remember that you're truly amazing. Love yourself. Look around and take note of the beautiful things around you. Things will get better. We will get through this. Remember, I'm here too. I'm willing to listen, to just be there if you need me. Life is tough, but I want to tell you, you're tougher, you're stronger, and it will get better. If you or someone you know is suffering from suicidal thoughts, please call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just writing down. Thank you. All right. McKenna, do you feel comfortable sharing?
Stop surviving and start fighting. Those are the words Jazz Thorne heard when she woke up from her 14th and final suicide attempt. Hi, my name is McKenna Marr, and I'm going to talk about why it's not only the mentally ill or depressed who die by suicide. Depression or anxiety can sometimes be a factor in committing suicide, but not always. A lot of the time, people just can feel like a burden, like nobody wants them around. Sometimes people just don't see anything worth living for, and not because they're depressed, but because they can't figure out that there's more to life than paying bills or having kids. And let's face it, we've all been there at some point in our lives. And if you haven't, trust me, there'll be a day when you feel stressed or overwhelmed and you do reach that point. The problem is people think that the only way out of those feelings is suicide. You're not a burden. You're loved. You're special. And if you ever feel suicidal or even a little overwhelmed with life, talk with someone you trust or contact the suicide hotline at 1-800-273-8255.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Usually the space bar trick works to unmute myself. Thank you so much. All right. Please.
Okay. Dear Evan Hansen, Hamilton, next to normal. Just musicals, right? Wrong. These musicals are helping people break walls and overcome the stigma against mental health. Hi, my name is Grace Cruz, and this is why you shouldn't stigmatize against those with mental illnesses. Dear Evan Hansen, A boy with crippling social anxiety befriends a boy who deals with substance abuse and depression and eventually overdoses. Hamilton, a man who was deep in depression and wrote his way out. Next to normal, a woman suffering with bipolar disorder and the effect it has on her family. According to WebMD, the most important things to remember when coping with stigma is that there is treatment and you are not alone. People you see every day could be dealing with a mental illness. Stigma can make these suffering people feel worse and lead to more people choosing to take their own lives. How would it feel if you were the one dealing with this stigma? Mayo Clinic says that stigma doesn't just come from others. Feelings of guilt and weakness can lead to a person stigmatizing against themselves. In conclusion, stigma can come from many different places. It is an unfair ruling against those who are suffering. Don't let this stigma darken your heart.
So thank you so much. Thank you all so much for sticking through this and for enduring this difficult topic. And once again, forewarning, we are going to be going through another somewhat difficult topic as well. And just on time, I don't want to butcher this, Miss Rana or Rana? Oh, I can't hear you. You're unmuted. Maybe it's a me thing. Sometimes you're fine. Sometimes when I log in for whatever reason, it says I have to restart my audio or do something weird. It sometimes does the same glitch where whether I'm muted or unmuted, it does this thing to me. But I'll go ahead and say that today's guest speaker will be talking about domestic violence, human trafficking, warning signs, and safety. Whenever she pops back on here, looks like she's just trying to work out some technical issues here. Just a moment, y'all. Go away, notifications. So as if there was a ghost in the office when that last, as if there was a ghost in the office, like I'm listening and just so emotionally involved in y'all's speeches, and this whole pile of stuff like falls down on the other side of the room. I'm like, ah! Okay, anyways, random note. That's kind of why I jumped if anybody saw that. All right, she is popping on again, and we're gonna see if everything works this time. All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Hello, welcome.
You know, I think it's because I had my AirPods on trying to look cool for these kids, and now it's backfiring on me.
Oh no, we're so happy to have you. I will go ahead and let you take it from here, introduce yourself and go to it. And I just, once again, trigger warning, and if anybody at any point in time feels like it's a little bit triggering or there's too much of a conversation, feel free to turn off your camera, walk away. Just give me a chat. Just let me know you're okay. Sound good? All right.
Right. So my name is Dinah Zachariah, and I'm from the Community Coalition Against Human Trafficking. Like Dolly said, if this is something that's too intense for you, you're uncomfortable, please feel free to, mute, slow the volume, whatever you need to do to feel comfortable. It is a dark topic, but that being said, it's something that we definitely need to address because it's happening. So this is our intro training. Mainly with this training, we're just trying to get the topic of human trafficking, sex trafficking on your radar. Don't feel like you have to know everything about human trafficking after this training, because every day for myself, it's a learning experience. We just kind of want to encourage you all to, follow up, research, have a conversation with family and friends after this training to get that spark going. I think I can share my screen. Okay, so can you make me a co-host or, yeah, and then I'll give it back to you once I'm done. Perfect. All right, so we have a poll that popped up. I just exit off of that. Share screen. Perfect. Okay. So real quick about, all right. So when we talk about human trafficking, and usually I try to get people to interact, but I know that everyone has themselves muted. I don't know if they want to unmute themselves, but I kind of wanted to get from their perspective of like what they think human trafficking is or what it involves. So if you all feel comfortable to unmute yourselves, do that. If you want to type it up, also do that. We can talk about it in the chat box. So when we say human trafficking, what comes to your mind? Anybody? TikTok, hashtag Save the Children, Wayfair scandals. What do we think of when we think of human trafficking? Where someone controls somebody else? Yeah, for sure. That's something that's the biggest part of human trafficking is someone controlling slave labor. Great. Right. So with human trafficking, there's different types of trafficking, but with human trafficking, I'm just going to open up the chat box. When someone is taken against their own will, right? So it's a violation of human rights, and we'll go and dissect into what the definition is, but it involves the use of force, fraud, coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial acts. There's different types of human trafficking. Today we'll be talking about sex trafficking and labor trafficking, two types of trafficking that we see here in East Tennessee, especially in those rural areas. But it's important to know that this is a major crime industry generating about $32 billion in revenue. So it's second in line right behind drugs. So it's something that's incredibly profitable, but it's hard to, screen for. I mean, it's happening in plain sight, but it's hard to detect. You really have to dig and investigate. My mouse is acting up. So we'll go into what sex trafficking is. So this is the big fancy definition, but it basically is when someone makes someone engage in some sort of commercial act against their own will, right? So it's that force, fraud, or coercion, and we'll talk about what those terms mean in a little bit. But what's really important to know is that it's commercial oriented, right? So it's profit oriented. We think about what? Money. We think about that's the main object, right? But it can mean different things. It could be, someone is doing the exchange for a job, for health insurance, for shelter, for dental insurance for their child. So that commercial act might be hard to detect because it's not always going to be money, and it's not always going to be happening right then and there when we're talking about that exchange. Like I said, there's the two most common forms of sex trafficking we see here in East Tennessee is familial trafficking and intimate partner trafficking, right? So familial trafficking is when a family member acts as a trafficker, right? And intimate partner trafficking is when it's a boyfriend, when it's, husband or a wife. Throughout this presentation, I'll be using pronouns he and him as a trafficker. I want you to know that women also can traffic, right? But we're just seeing a higher prevalence of men being the traffickers, men and boys. And then I'll also be using the pronouns she and her as a trafficked individual, the victim. Boys and men are also trafficked. I think there's a stigma here is like, guys have to look strong and, have this certain image to the community and to the friends and family that they can't look weak. And if they were to be trafficked, I mean, that's something humiliating. So it's definitely underreported for sure, but we're seeing again a prevalence with our victims being women and girls. So I just want to give you that from the very beginning. It's important to know we're talking about sex trafficking. It's not all black and white. There's a lot of gray area. There's different types. This is a very unique type of victimization, right? And when you're looking out like in the community as advocates and, maybe you have a friend or a family member or whoever it is, that might be trafficked, it's not going to have kind of this, 1 through 10 list of, they're definitely being trafficked, or these indicators. There's going to be a lot of gray area, and it's important when we're, looking out to know that that gray area is very, very, very big. Like I said, the exchange is going to be difficult to detect. It's, when we're talking about trafficking, it's never going to naturally present itself. It's very, very rarely or unlikely that someone's going to come up to you and say, hey, I'm being trafficked. I need some help. Maybe they might give you some other indicator just saying, my boyfriend's really controlling and doesn't allow me to go here, and he always has to come with me, or he doesn't make me happy all the time. Maybe he beats me. That might be the cry for help, but it's going to be very rare for them to say, hey, I'm being trafficked. We'll talk about those indicators in a little bit. Labor trafficking, we don't talk about it as much in this presentation. Doesn't mean it's not important. It's definitely important. Again, so you have that force, fraud, or coercion, right, to make someone work. So subjecting that person to some sort of involuntary servitude, right? Forcing them to do something they don't want to, not paying them at all, paying them very little. It happens, labor context, more in like agricultural farms, landscaping, factories, family businesses. It's harder to spot here in the US because demographic wise, the people that are being affected are people that are coming from different countries, to work here for better job opportunities. They might not have proper documentation. If they do have documentation, maybe that person that's trafficking them is holding it, against their will of blackmailing them. If you don't do this, I'm going to call ICE, I'm going to call law enforcement, I'm going to burn your paperwork. So you can imagine if you're in that position, coming to the States to find a better job opportunity, you have no money, and someone's withholding all that paperwork, you're stuck in that cycle. And it's important to know with labor and sex trafficking is that these people, not always are chained to a bed. When people have this misconception of sex trafficking is being in a cage or chained to a bed, they're stuck in the cycle for many reasons. It's blackmail, it's beating them, it's threatening to post something on Facebook or to tell, their pastor, because traffickers are not strangers. They actually know their victims. And that's a big misconception we're trying to, debunk, is that it's not some dude popping out of the bush saying, hey, time to get trafficked. It's your partner, it's your parent. I'm not trying to freak everyone out, but it's important to know that if we're really trying to tackle this issue down, we have to have a clear idea of what it looks like and what it does not look like. So I know I had mentioned the terms force, fraud, or coercion. I just wanted to make sure that everyone kind of understood what that meant, right? So force, physical harm, beating them, tying them down. We see that sometimes. Fraud, false promises. A lot of times trafficker comes into this person's life. They know that person, right? Maybe, and I'm going to use a lot of instances because you all are kids. Maybe this person, it comes from a foster home and doesn't have a lot, right? Doesn't have the newest phone, the newest shoes, the newest clothes. And here comes trafficker. It's your friend's parent. Hey, I'll buy those items for you, right? I'll take care of you, right? I'll make sure that everything you need is covered. I'll take you on an adventure. We'll go to travel to California, whatever it is, right? They'll do false promises. And sometimes they'll fulfill some of those promises, but that's to make sure to groom them. If you all heard that term, to groom somebody. When we talk a lot about human trafficking in the cycle, it's very similar to domestic violence. There's that process of grooming that person, building that trust and that relationship, and then slowly pushing those personal boundaries. Coercion, threats of threatening them, abusive legal processes. A lot of the times, if that person is 17, 18 years old, about to age out, trafficker will threaten to call the police on them. Hey, you're 18 now, that's a prostitution charge. If you don't do what I say, I'm gonna get law enforcement on you, and you'll be on their radar in a bad way, right? So that's a couple of examples of what force, fraud, or coercion mean. And like I said, that commercial act, it's profit oriented. So it is the perfect crime. I hate saying it, where we really want to look at this public health issue. It is unfortunately the perfect crime because we'll talk about, I want to ruin the slides, we'll talk about why it's the perfect crime. So giving you some statistics, I don't want you to get stuck on these numbers because do you think everything goes reported? Of course not, right? But we believe that there's 40 million slaves in the world. In the US, 800,000 individuals are trafficked every year, and that number is going up for many reasons. Right now with COVID, we talk about, anyone is vulnerable of being trafficked, right? But there's more high-risk populations that are even more vulnerable And with COVID, it's made that high-risk population even more vulnerable. We'll talk about those vulnerabilities in a little bit. On average, 2 children are trafficked every minute. Like I said, larger percentage of our trafficked individuals are women and girls, and 27% of those individuals are under the age of 18. I can tell you almost half of our clientele are minors. Minors are definitely a high risk. Minors that are in foster care are at high risk. So all these contributing factors add on to, put these people at high risk of being trafficked. So anyone, unfortunately, is susceptible of being trafficked. Again, I don't want you all to like freak out and be paranoid when you're walking out the door, but it's important to be aware of your surroundings, right? There are bad people out there, and it's okay for us to talk about this topic and understand what, how it happens, why it happens, to protect ourselves and protect our community. So one of the biggest myths that we want to debunk is that it's happening only overseas. I love the movie Taken. I don't know if you all have seen that. It's a wonderful movie. I love quoting the guy. He's funny. But is that what we're seeing here in East Tennessee? No. Is it someone, the Facebook post, you see someone posting, I was walking in TJ Maxx and someone was taking pictures of me and there was a white car outside and they put honey on top of my car. I've been seeing stuff on TikTok and, I think it's great that people are trying to bring awareness and, give recommendation and advice of what to avoid, but is that what's really happening? No. Is that something shady that you should report? Yes. But is that human trafficking? No. So that's one that we want to debunk, is that it is happening here in the States, and it's happening here in East Tennessee. So here's a map from Polaris Project. If you ever have to do a project or need some information or data or articles, this is a wonderful website you should access. Gives you information of each state of what they have in regards to cases, survivors, people they've prosecuted. But this map is from, I think I got my maps mixed up. Yes, I did. Okay, so this is from 2017. And they're also in charge of the human trafficking hotline, right? So this is where they're getting their calls from. So you're seeing that, of course, in those bigger cities, with the red and the orange areas, that's where they're getting more of the calls from. But you're also seeing that it's happening in rural areas, right? So it's not just the misconception of it only happens in New York City and it only happens in California on this one strip on Rodeo Drive in the movie Pretty Woman. Yeah, it's happening there, but it's also happening in rural areas. I mean, look at Tennessee. We're pretty much almost covered. That's from 2017. And then this is 2018. So you can see that in a year, pretty much Tennessee is completely covered. So that's another myth that we want to go ahead and debunk, is that, yes, it's happening in bigger cities. And yes, it's happening here in Tennessee. It's happening in East Tennessee. It's happening in our backyard. So it's something that we definitely need to address and be community advocates and look for those indicators and make those reports. Do we have any questions? If you'll have any questions throughout this presentation, jot it in the chat box. That way you don't forget, because sometimes something will pop up. And
Hey, Rana, can you, since you're the host, somebody got kicked off and needs to get back on. Is there somebody in the waiting room that you can admit back in? Just Kindling. Do you know how to do that?
Yes. Oops. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome back, friend. Yeah, if that person that got kicked out needs me to go back on a couple of slides or something, we definitely can do that. So let's look at some Tennessee stats, right? Because we know that's happening here. And these numbers might not look like it's a big deal, but again, this is something that's underreported, extremely underreported. So this is from the National Human Trafficking Hotline back in 2018. So there were 353 trafficked individuals, 118 traffickers, and then 40 trafficking businesses. So here at our agency, we've had 119 referrals since January, and we've served 88. So it's definitely happening here. I mean, it is a challenge to, get these people and help them out. So you can imagine, I mean, this is underreported, and we're going to debunk that myth that it's only happening in New York and LA. It's happening here for sure. Another, which I wrote down, is so Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI, who we work with very closely, they did a report last year, and in all 95 counties, there was human trafficking, reports of human trafficking. So it's happening in every single county in Tennessee. So it's something that we definitely need to address. So we know it's happening. We know that's happening in our backyard. Who do we need to, keep an eye out on and make sure that everyone is, safe and protected? So like I said, trafficking can happen to anyone, no matter the ethnicity, no matter the race, no matter the social class. It's kind of like cancer. It knows no boundaries. There definitely are people that are more at risk because of their background, because of their vulnerabilities. We all have vulnerabilities. Are all of them visible? No. But for this group, and this is a small, there are plenty of other groups that are at risk, but, for these examples right here on the slide, they have vulnerabilities that are visible, that, someone can, see that this kid's in a foster home. Maybe this person's homeless, or this person is stigmatized and is in the LGBTQ community. So the common aspect of these populations is that they're marginalized from society, right? They are being stigmatized by society, whether from their class, the way they look, the way they dress, where they live, the color of their skin. So, and that kind of shows in the predatory nature of this, right? So traffickers look for these people, right? I kind of use the metaphor of like a lion looking at a herd of wildebeest, right? Is this lion going to attack the one that's protected and has the shelter and has the support system? No. More likely, they're going to try to choose the wildebeest that's younger, smaller, broken, has an injury, right? Because it's easier to groom, to recruit, or not recruit, excuse me, lure that person into that cycle. Like I said, the two most common types of trafficking we see in Tennessee are familial and intimate partner trafficking. We see this in rural areas where there's a lot of drug addiction and poverty. So back to that example of intimate partner trafficking, it's very common for a guy, a boyfriend, to meet this young girl in person on Instagram. Maybe he added her, there's one mutual friend, and she thinks, all right, this person is cool. If there's a mutual friend, that means that this person's legit. I've done that, and that's bad. We shouldn't do that. You should make sure that you know the person, you've seen this person, you trust this person, and even if that person still could be bad, because we said it's not a stranger that's trafficking, it's someone that they know and they trust. But this person will, buy this girl nice clothes, treat her right, promise her adventure and safety, and give her all this affection. We all like affection. We all want to be loved and given attention to. And then one day that person will push that boundary and ask her to do something that maybe she doesn't want to do, but she doesn't want to lose that person because he loves her and he treats her right. So she's willing to do that. Traffickers, exploit them off of their vulnerabilities and manipulate them, right? So they are mind controllers. They are mass mind manipulators. We have to give them credit for that. We really have to kind of look at it from the trafficker's perspective of, how they think and who they're looking for and what they're looking for when it comes to who they want to traffic. Kids in foster care, right? Traffickers know that if these kids disappear off the grid, they're less likely to be checked on. We're not bashing on DCS, just sometimes there are some situations where they fall off the grid or fall in the cracks. Traffickers know that these kids want to be needed and loved by others, right? They're stuck in a cycle of, they're in a foster care home because their previous situation was bad. Parents maybe were neglecting them. Their guardians were neglecting them. They were abusing them. So they've already had this really bad, history of coming from a not the best family of origin, right? So they want that love, they want that safety. They're, they look for that, right? Your kids, you all might deny, but you all are dependent on your parents or guardians because that's, that's something natural, right? So when they don't have that in their life, they go searching for it, or they have that void, and here comes trafficker, here comes, best friend, boyfriend, family member, and fills in that void. Children or adults with special needs, again, they have high vulnerabilities. Crazy number that we looked at was within 48 hours of a kid running away, 1 out of 3 kids will be approached by a trafficker, which is a scary number to think, because I remember when I was younger, I got mad at my parents and I ran away to Burger King for a day. Had I been there for another day, and me being young and, not knowing better, maybe I would have thought, okay, this person is an adult and I trust this person, they want to take care of me. So again, 1 out of 3 children will be approached by a trafficker within 40 hours of running away. And when we look at, this group right now on the slide, I don't know if you all have done this yet in class, but we talk about, intro to psych class, that pyramid, right? Maslow hierarchy of needs, 5 levels, 5 stages that motivate our behavior, right? A lot of these people on this list don't have those basic needs, the physiological needs, the shelter, the clothes, the newest phone, the newest pair of shoes, whatever it is. They don't have that love and safety. They don't have that sense of belonging. So for a trafficker, this is jackpot. This is, somebody that can easily be, groomed and given all this attention and basically control them later on down the road. So for traffickers, it would not be business smart. I hate using that word. It would not be smart for them and their business to kidnap somebody in the Target parking lot. Why? Because that person most likely has family that'll be asking about them. That person, that family will probably contact law enforcement. That person will probably try to escape. So for a trafficker, it's easier to groom some people on this list that you're seeing right now than kidnap someone in the parking lot. It happens, but very, very rarely. It's not what we're seeing with our clientele, with our stories. It's mom trafficking them since they were 5 years old. It's their boyfriend trafficking them slowly and blackmailing them and, taking their nudes and threatening to post the nudes on Facebook. That's what we're seeing more often. So that's, the myth that we want to debunk. It's not stranger danger. People are not putting themselves in these, they want to be put in these dangerous, situations. People don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be trafficked. I want to be a sex worker. I like this life. I want people to beat me up. I want, these people that are buying me to beat me up and, treat me like crap. They don't, right? Maybe there's like a 1%, maybe. But if you look at sex workers, most of them have been trafficked when they were younger and they're stuck in the cycle for many reasons. So anyone with a vulnerability can be exploited. I know I kind of go on random tangents, but that's my point, is that, we all have vulnerabilities, but unfortunately there are specific groups that have more vulnerabilities, higher vulnerabilities, that have that immediate need of assistance they need, and trafficker can easily come in and fill in that void. Do we have a question, anybody? No? Okay, I thought I saw someone raise their hand. So we always have this question of, why are they stuck in this situation? If I was in this situation, I would have easily left. I mean, the first week, if a guy tried to traffic me or threaten me, I would have easily left. Easier said than done, right? There are many reasons why a trafficked individual might not be able to get out of that situation. We go back to vulnerabilities. Maybe that person went through some sort of traumatic stress, right? And that trafficker was there for that individual. Maybe that person, just lost their job during COVID, and trafficked individual is best friend. Hey, I got you. I'll pay for rent. You know what? I'll take care of everything else. Just move in with me, right? Easy to control that person when they're living with them. Maybe that person just feels alone and wants attention. I mean, I know if I live by myself and during COVID, it's, you get really lonely. You want someone to talk to you and give you attention. Maybe that person went through a breakup, here comes, Sally just broke up with her boyfriend, goes to a party. Here comes, a friend of a friend that she saw on Instagram, and he comes up to her and he's like, who do I have to beat up? Because I never want to see you this sad, right? Us in the audience are like, oh my gosh, this guy's so cute. But I mean, for all we know, he's, slowly grooming her. He's trying to impress her, trying to impress her friends. Heck, maybe even buys them beer and some weed. He's the cool guy. He has his bachelor's in business. He doesn't look like he's a bad guy, right? Because traffickers look like, they dress a certain way. Maybe they have tattoos all over their face. They drive a Cadillac. No, traffickers can be anybody. And that's kind of the scary thing about this crime, is that, again, I'm not trying to paranoid people, but it could be anybody, and most likely it's someone that if you're in that situation. God forbid not. So again, the first point, they might have experienced some sort of traumatic stress. They might not identify. We go back to familial trafficking, and that's very common here in East Tennessee. The parent is the trafficker. For 8-year-old Tommy, mom has taught him every month you go to the landlord, do it. You do whatever he asks you to do, and you come back, right? Tommy trusts mom, right? Mom, you listen to mom, you follow her rules. Mom is your protector and your savior. So for Tommy, he might not realize that he's in a dangerous situation. That it's normalized behavior with familial trafficking. A lot of the times, mom did it, grandma did it. It's multi-generational, and it's become a normalized behavior, right? So if we come up to Tommy, and we're trying to help him, we're saying, "Hey, are you being trafficked?" He's like, "No, this is something normal." They're not going to identify, and maybe if they do identify, who wants to label themselves the victim, right? They might be in denial about that. They might have been convinced to lie. Again, back to that force, fraud, or coercion, threatening to beat them, threatening to do something to a family member. I know where you live. I know your youth group that you go to. So you better lie. It's best for you to just, to stay in this cycle. They might be they might be convinced, they might feel, loyal to the trafficker. And this is probably the hardest thing, is during that process where that trafficker builds that relationship, builds that trust, which is really hard to break, especially with kids. If that person is dating their trafficker, they might be stubborn and say, no, like, he's actually a really good person. He takes care of me. He tells me, like, no one else cares about me except him. So why would I believe you, right? They build this really strong bond. A lot of times they're trauma bonds. So trauma bonds are exactly what they sound like. Do you all have a friend that's in a relationship that is clearly toxic, and it's not healthy, and you wonder, why on earth have they not left this person? And even if they did leave that person, then they probably go back within like a week or two, or they just constantly break up, get back together. It's really easy for us on the outside to think, like, how can they not see this toxic relationship? But for them in that relationship, sometimes they genuinely cannot acknowledge that they're in that toxic relationship. So that trauma bonds occur when that trafficker repeats that cycle of abuse, whether it's emotionally, physically, or mentally, with that individual. And then they'll kind of have that makeup period, right? So maybe they slap her, or maybe he like calls her a whore the first time, and then he's like, babe, I'm so sorry, let me buy you this present, I promise I'll never say that again. Here comes that, physical, abuse, slaps her. I'm so sorry, I was so angry. I would never beat you. Just at one time, has that cycle of, making those amends. So, which plays a role in that person, in the victim's mind, where they kind of have this need of like validation of love. Like, maybe if I did this, he wouldn't have done this. Maybe if I just listened to him, he wouldn't have slapped me. Or maybe he's doing this because he loves me, right? They kind of associate love and abuse together, which is really not healthy. And not only does it happen in romantic relationships, but it happens between colleagues and family members and friends. So that trafficker will condition that person to believe that this relationship is completely normal, that everyone else goes through the same stuff. So like, you really shouldn't think much into it. Everyone goes through their ups and downs in relationships. It's not normal, but that trafficker will convince that person that, right? They'll groom their mind. And unfortunately, the longer the person stays with that person, it becomes even more challenging to get them out of that cycle. With domestic violence, it takes about 7-8 times for that person to clearly just cut off from that person. Same thing with trafficking. A lot of times we'll have our clients come to us, we'll help them out, they're doing really great, and then they'll go back to their trafficker, or they'll go to a different one, or they'll start using substances again. And that's something that we don't want to celebrate, but we just, it's an expectation. The mind, the brain, when it goes through trauma, tries to sometimes reenact that trauma to kind of master it. And that's a different spiel I'm not going to go through. But if you all have not heard about Stockholm Syndrome, you should definitely read into that. Basically goes back to, there was some robbers in Sweden, and they had captured a couple people that were at the bank for a week or so. And towards the end, I guess during that moment when they were holding them hostage at the bank for a week, the victims developed positive feelings towards the abusers and develop negative feelings towards police authorities. And that's what happens a lot of times, is that that abused individual will sympathize towards their abuser. Even after that whole Stockholm Syndrome, then they got arrested, the bad guys got arrested, some of the victims even went to prison to go visit them. I think one of them even married one of the bad dudes, the abuser, excuse me. So that's honestly what we see with a lot of our clients, is that they have this loyalty to their abuser, whether it's their parent or their partner. Sorry, we're too long on this slide, but immediate needs may be great overwhelming. So those are just a couple reasons of why they're stuck in that situation. I think I got a question, which is great. Is there someone in the waiting room again? Because I just got a notification from somebody in the chat.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was me. I was just, one of our students got kicked off, and I wanted to see if she was
Okay.
in the waiting room at all, or if maybe she just is still having technical difficulties.
Yeah, I don't see anyone in the waiting room. I just see.
Okay. And I do have questions. I know you got excited, but I was waiting until after you were done. So, but if that's okay, I'll let you keep your flow going because you're rocking and rolling it, and then I'll ask my questions afterwards. That's
Yeah,
cool.
we have a couple more slides, and then we'll go through that. So, do you have to be done by 12? Because I know it's 11:52 right now.
So right at 12, our students break out and they go into what's called SADD club. So usually what happens is like, I just try to, after you're done presenting, I'll just make sure nobody has any questions, and then I'll just explain the homework assignment to everybody, and then they'll go on to their club.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but no pressure, Emma. Do we have somebody showing up right at 12 today?
So we're not doing SADD today.
Oh,
Today.
okay.
We have a service project tomorrow that will be all day. So no SADD classes today.
Oh, okay. So if we go like 5 minutes over, is everybody okay to hang in there? I just don't want her to feel rushed. Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Okay, cool. I just realized I have too much highlighter on my face. All right, so how on earth is this thriving? We know it's happening. We know that there are high-risk populations, but how on earth is this thriving, especially here in the U.S.? So I kind of use the example. One important thing to know is that, these traffickers are lazy, but they're smart business people, right? They know who to groom and who to lure into the cycle. They know how to stay off of people's radar. They know that this is something that's really hard to detect. So we have to kind of give them props that they're smart in their business. So human trafficking is incredibly profitable, as you all can, when we mentioned that $32 billion internationally, with a low risk of getting caught. It's much easier to see the presence of a person rather than the presence of weapons or controlled substances. So let's say I'm a bad person. I'm driving in my car and I get pulled over and I have some sort of illegal weapon that I'm planning on selling, right? The risk of getting caught if the cop searches my car is pretty big. Reward, low, because I'm selling one weapon. If I have a couple of bags of weed, risk of getting caught, maybe I can hide it easier than a weapon, and reward is a bit more because I have more than one item, right? But when it comes to a human being, do you think police officer pulls me over and says, "Are you trafficking that person?" Of course not. They're going to think that's my best friend. They're going to think that's my partner. They're going to think that's my relative, whoever. They're not going to question that. No one would think that, right? So that's why it's a perfect crime. But when it comes to selling a person, you can sell a person over and over and over again. Reports show that victims are sold 20 to 40 times a day, 6 to 7 days a week. Right. A study back in 2010 found that one pimp had a $500 daily quota. So each person had to make $500 for him. He probably still beating them. But considering this person is, not putting this on his tax return, he probably made from those 4 victims over $600,000 in that year. Right. So it's incredibly profitable. Traffickers know that there's a demand, unfortunately, and that's a different spiel. I'm not going to go on a tangent. We need to figure out, there's not people that wake up in the morning and say, "Hey, I want to be trafficked. Please pick me." We have people that want to buy people for sex and kids for sex. So we really need to address that and really go into, mental health awareness and addressing that. But that's, one misconception that we want to also debunk is that, people don't want to go into this. People don't volunteer and say, "Pick me." Unfortunately, traffickers just know who to build that trust and groom that person. So there would be no money made if there was no demand, and unfortunately there isn't demand. So who are traffickers, real quick? I think I pretty much addressed that. Is that it can be anybody. It can be a family member, it can be a friend, it can be a boss, So it is not just the whole pimps and gang members. Yes, they do traffic, but here what we're seeing in East Tennessee is a family member or a friend or a partner or a spouse. So traffickers could be anybody. There's not a group on Facebook, traffickers, reunited. If only, that'd be much easier to arrest those people. So identifying anyone that's being trafficked for kids, for minors, maybe that person says that they're older than what they actually are. Maybe they're socially isolated. Boyfriend has quickly boyfriend or girlfriend has quickly isolated them from their friends, from their family. Maybe they quit showing up to their Sunday school, or quit cheerleading or whatever it is, just kind of really isolate them from everybody and everything. Maybe trafficker has taken their identification. I don't know if you all have lost your ID or your school ID, but is it paying to replace? You can imagine if trafficker has taken their driver's license, their social security card, and their birth certificate. How do you replace those items? They're dependent on one another. If you want to replace your ID, you have to have your birth certificate and your social security number. But if all those are missing, how can you leave? I mean, even if you want to stay at the Salvation Army, you're not a minor, you're an adult, you have to have your driver's license. So traffickers are smart when they take all that documentation and prevent them from leaving. Maybe that person might be inappropriately dressed. It's wintertime and they're wearing summer attire and they're wearing the same outfit for like a week or two. They don't have any sort of belongings, no purse, no ID. If they do have a phone, maybe have a couple of prepaid phones. Also with minors, sometimes traffickers will, give them a couple $100 and buy them the newest bag and phone and shoes in that grooming process. So that can kind of be an indicator of like, where are you getting all this money? Like your parents didn't buy you this stuff, obviously, and why is your boyfriend buying you all this stuff? It just seems like too good to be true. Signs of physical abuse. Maybe that person has bruises, cuts, cigarette burns on their arms, their wrists. Maybe there's some bruising on their neck. And of course, evidence of controlling or dominating relationships. So those are just a couple of indicators that we give. So again, that person could have a couple indicators and just kind of be in a dangerous situation, or that person might have no indicators that I have right here, for example, and still being trafficked. So the most important part when it comes to you all having conversations with your friends or family, or someone that you feel or you're concerned about, is building that trust. You never want to be like, hey, are you being trafficked? Because that's going to be a dead end. Saying, hey, I noticed that you've not been coming to class a lot. Hey, I noticed you've not been, you haven't come to our church meetings, whatever it is. I'm worried about you. How is your boyfriend Ricky? Does he make you happy? Questions like that show that you genuinely care about that person and you want that person to open up, and maybe you'll get some answers and then start referring them to saying, hey, I know this agency that's really great. They can help you out. So we never want to be like, hey, are you being trafficked? Because that's never gonna turn up, it's gonna be that dead end. I'm gonna skip this because we're kind of in a rush, but I do want to show you, that tattoo, for example. That is what we see with our clients, is that traffickers brand their victims. And there's one that I didn't put on here, but it's a barcode. What do we see on barcode? We see those things on products, things that you can purchase, and traffickers basically dehumanize their victims to show them that they're nothing more than a product. If you had a tattoo on your neck that said Ricky Toe and it was visible and people are looking at you, you're going to start kind of thinking of yourself, lowering yourself, like, maybe I am nothing more than trash. Maybe I am nothing more than a product. So traffickers know what they're doing when they put these kind of tattoos on them. They're dehumanizing them and showing them that, they're nothing more than a product, and that, society and community is going to slap them as the hoe, as a sex worker, and turn their shoulder, right? So traffickers know that if they dress them like a prostitute, talk like a prostitute, work in areas that, prostitutes work in, that people are, not everybody, but some people are going to try to avoid that situation and say, that's not my problem. I'm not putting this video, it's a 3-minute video, but for me, I'm not a social worker, I'm a public health person. So I'm all about prevention, right? So there are, of course, ways that we can look at indicators and, see if someone's being trafficked. But for me, I think it's important that we work upstream. We need to look at these populations that are vulnerable, that have a lot of challenges, and to make sure that we have their back, so that if a trafficker does try to approach them, that all their vulnerabilities have been covered. They have, homeless population or kids that are in foster care, that they have those physiological needs. They have that love and that safety and the sense of belonging, to make sure that if a trafficker does approach them, they're like, no, I'm good. I actually have people that have my back. So hopefully this plays.
Towards the shore. Help, said the
Can you all hear?
There was once a carpenter that lived by a river in a village near you. Every day, with his trusty hammer, he built boats out of wood. One day, as the carpenter was working, he looked out onto the river and saw a child trying to swim towards the shore. Help, said the child. The current is too strong. So the carpenter grabbed a boat and rescued the child. How did you get into the river? Asked the carpenter. I fell in upstream, said the child. The next day, when the carpenter looked out onto the river, he saw 2 children struggling to swim towards the shore. Help, the children said. The carpenter called out to another villager, and together they rescued the children. But the next day, there were 5 children, and the next day, there were a dozen, and soon the whole village was busy rescuing children from the river. The villagers grew weary, and some of the boats started to leak and break from overuse. The carpenter worked tirelessly to repair them, but as the number of children in the river grew, soon there weren't even enough boats to get the job done. One day, the carpenter asked himself a question. Why and how are so many children falling into the river in the first place? So he bravely ran upstream to find out. There, he saw a big, windy village with many houses, and some of the houses were in a state of disrepair. And when the wind blew especially hard, the houses creaked and cracked, and things were swept out of them and into the nearby river. Sometimes what was swept up was children. The carpenter saw an old lady walking by. Excuse me, he said to the old lady, tell me, why are these houses so broken down? Why aren't these houses stronger? The people of this village want to fix these houses so that they can resist the wind, the old lady replied. But we do not have the tools to do so, and the wind lately has been especially strong. I can help, said the carpenter. And with the help of the old lady, he gathered the villagers, gave them his hammer, and taught them how to use it so that they could learn to make their houses strong when the wind blew especially hard and keep their children from falling into the river. Yay! Because you see, if we make the effort to go upstream and help build strong foundations there, we won't need to work so hard to rescue children downstream.
All right, so I love that video. I actually watched that right when I went into grad school of kind of why did I choose public health. And it's, you know, the biggest thing for us, I feel, is not only identifying and responding to individuals that have been trafficked, but prevention. You know, if we can prevent anyone being trafficked, I mean, it'll make everyone's life, you know, easier, and you know, no one's gonna get hurt or, you know, dealing with trauma. So prevention is the biggest thing. Working upstream, looking at these populations that are vulnerable, you know, having the communities back and providing resources and tools, and just being community advocates, in my opinion, is really crucial when it comes to addressing and identifying human trafficking. It's just making sure those high-risk populations are not high-risk populations, right? How can we prevent human trafficking? Having conversations, right? If we can't talk about what human trafficking, sex trafficking is, how can we end it, right? So we have to have conversations of, this is what it looks like. Hey, I had a presentation, she talked about this. You know, it might not be the most comfortable or, you know, great dinner conversation to have, but we have to have those conversations, because if we don't know what it looks like, how are we going to end it? Fostering those safe homes and neighborhoods. If you have you know, you live in an area where there's some vulnerable populations, you know, get together and, you know, give those tools and the resources for those people that need help, that have those vulnerabilities, and ending business profits from traffic related transactions. So being for labor trafficking, at least, you know, being aware of what you purchase. Sometimes things are cheap for a reason. Maybe that person that made that item was not paid at all or paid little for making that item. So I know that's hard, because I love me a good sale, but maybe during the holidays, say, hey, during like Christmas and Thanksgiving or whatnot, I won't buy anything that was, you know, labor trafficked. There's lots of apps nowadays you can get on your phone, and you can scan barcodes to see if there's any sort of labor trafficking. So I know there's one called Free to Work, free, the number 2 work. If you all want to download that and you just scan your clothes. I know that Old Navy, Gap, and Banana Republic have a wonderful score. So they did well. They were transparent when they asked them questions about, how much they paid their workers and whatnot. So this is just kind of an overview of who we helped out. I know it's 12:06. I'm rushing, but these are our numbers from last year. So we reached 200 survivors. 90 survivors stayed at our safe house. So we have a safe house in Knoxville. We offer over 3,000 unique services. That's taking to the therapist, going to court, going to the hospital, going for a job interview. Our care coordinators are wonderful and work around the clock with our survivors. So we offer over 3,000 unique services. We've trained over 5,000 community members. That includes law enforcement, teachers, social workers, medical professionals. So we're trying to train every single person so that everyone feels like they know what human trafficking is and know how to recognize and how to respond to it. We have lots of community active partners. What you can do to help, add us on social media. We post articles, blogs. We have a fundraiser going on right now called Share Your Stride, which you all should join. So you're going to do half of a marathon in the month of October. All the proceeds go back to us and helping out our clients. We have quarterly newsletters if you want to be part of that. We put our statistics and data of who we helped out, counties we've touched base with, and of course we have more in detailed training. So this is our shorter version of our intro. Usually it's an hour 15, but I know we're on a time limit. But those are a couple ways you can help out and help us out in ending human trafficking. If you see something or have this gut feeling, I always say when you have that gut feeling, there's a reason why you have that gut feeling. Call human trafficking hotline, the national, that you can even ask questions like, hey, I saw this. Is this something to be concerned about? If not, no big deal. At least you were a good community member and, we're observant of your environment and what was happening. And that bottom number is our hotline. So if you know somebody that needs assistance, give us a call. We cover 33 counties. We cover Chattanooga all the way to Bristol, Tennessee. So we're not just in, we don't cover just Knoxville area. So we cover pretty much all of East Tennessee. Who we are, I always put this at the very end. Biggest things that we do is we raise awareness by doing these trainings. We train everybody in the community. We have at least 13 different types of trainings going on right now. We have monthly meetings with our task force, people from FBI, law enforcement, other nonprofit agencies, direct service folks. We all meet up monthly, talk about, where are those gaps and cracks that we need to address? Where are people falling through those gaps? Making sure that we prosecute all the bad people out there. And last, we have that safe house for our survivors. And then it's a short-term safe house that has 4 beds. So we're in the process of getting a long-term safe house. But that's, where all the donations go to, is all this stuff to make sure that, we're helping out as many people as we can. That's our website. If you have any questions or you want to email me or you want to sign up for a training. I know we're at 12:09. Does anyone have any questions? If you all have time, I have time.
This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I do have questions, but if it's okay with you, I'm going to go ahead and tell them what their homework assignment is. If they don't have any questions, of course. That way, anybody who needs to log off can go ahead. But if anybody wants to stick around to ask questions, you're free to do so. Does that sound fair?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Okay. So everyone, this has been, I don't know, personally to me, very informative and super helpful. I hope you all found it as well. I hope it wasn't too as difficult as maybe as last week's subject was, although it is a very difficult subject. The homework assignment for this week, we are going to stick with the persuasive speech format. And the speeches this week are going to be persuading the class that one of the following statements isn't possible or true. The first statement that is not possible or true: women or men or people, gender neutral, who have experienced domestic violence should just leave. Second statement that isn't possible or true: victims who are abused often provoke their abusers. So those are the 2 statements to choose from. If there is something else that you want to write on, you can just message me and ask, and I'll say like, okay, Chris, yeah, sure, I can approve it for you. Just like I did last week, if for whatever reason the research gets too tough and the topic gets too hard, please reach out to me. I am willing to, I'm always here to help figure out some kind of solution to make this work. Everybody, I think everybody did great this week. You all had those attention getters. You all had those you did your introductions, your credentials. You had great overviews. You had the body and conclusions. I think all y'all nailed your speeches this week. Super proud of you. Keep up the great work with that format. Does anybody have any questions about the homework assignment? Okay. Again, feel free to reach out to me. If you did by chance do a peer evaluation form, please upload that along with the homework before class starts next week, along with all of your homework assignments. And let me know if you can't find reference forms or anything like that, and we'll figure out what we need to get to you so that you have everything uploaded in there. Sound cool? Okay, so if y'all are able to, you're welcome. You can leave if you need to. You're dismissed. But if you do have questions or would like to hear my questions and her answers, feel free to stick around. Before I ask mine, does anybody have questions? Okay, so here's question number one that I have. Are there any studies that suggest that more immigration laws support or make human trafficking more prevalent?
Repeat that question. Are there...
Yeah. So are there any studies or any reports that maybe suggest that strict immigration laws, making it harder for people to become legalized citizens in a country, support or make human trafficking more prevalent or easier?
Not that I know of. I mean, for sure, immigrants or anyone that's coming from a different country here are a high risk for many reasons. No resources, language barrier. But are there specific laws? No. I think I know for at least in East Tennessee, we're seeing more of, I think our demographics of Caucasian, Black, maybe like one or two that are coming from a different country. I don't have the exact answer for that. I can definitely get back to you.
That's fine. One of the things I was kind of curious about was if people are not legal citizens here, then maybe they have more of that weight or that fear of being caught here hung over their shoulders in a way that would, as you were mentioning earlier, you talked about how they hold the passports
Sure.
of people who visit. And so I wasn't sure if there were any like peer reviewed things that would support or kind of point evidence in those directions.
I'm gonna write that down and see if I can touch base with you about that. For sure, with that demographic, it does make it challenging for them to ask for help. I mean, you also have cultural differences, that kind of stuff sometimes stays at home. If mom is doing it or if, the boss is doing it, it's just best to, be complicit and just kind of, put your head down, just follow the rules and ask for help, because they're going to be afraid that if they don't have proper documentation that they'll also get, kicked out or deported. Unfortunately, which makes it challenging for us. So we're trying now to looking for someone that speaks Spanish fluently that could help me also to maybe do a training at a church, a Catholic church. I know it's going to kind of be a controversial training, but I think it's important to have those trainings, especially in those communities that are vulnerable. And for sure, anyone that's an immigrant or not documented is at high risk for sure.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question I have is how do the current conspiracy theories that are floating around, the Pizzagate, the whole Hollywood's behind human trafficking thing, the whole QAnon thing, how does that make the real battle against human trafficking harder, if it does?
I think social media is great. I think also it's made it a little bit challenging because, anyone can make a video and say, hey, watch out for these 5 indicators of human trafficking. And then you get like 20 million shares on it. I've seen that. I mean, I love watching TikTok in my spare time. And there's been a couple instances where, I see this girl and I know her intentions mean well of bringing awareness to it and ways to prevent it. but that's not what we're seeing. So then you start having people that start sharing this image and saying, all right, this is what human trafficking actually looks like. In actuality, you know, it's mom trafficking, it's a friend trafficking. Our director of youth services recently wrote a blog, and it was, you know, talking about the whole COVID and masks, and, you know, now it just makes it easier for traffickers to traffic their individuals, and they can hide. And she said that she said it perfectly when she said traffickers don't have to conceal their identities behind a mask, and they don't have to hide their victims behind the mask either, because they already have the best cover up of all. They're the parent, they're the partner, that of the boyfriend, and that's kind of cultivated it, makes it easier for them to fly under the radar without getting caught, because, you know, no one would think that. It's not the mask that's preventing us from identifying what human trafficking is. It's, you know, the fact that it's a parent or a partner that's making it more challenging to identify it. The whole Wayfair conspiracy, all that stuff. I think for us, it's easier to digest a crazy story like that than for us to think, you know, it's my neighbor and her daughter, she's trafficking her daughter. It's something that we don't want to swallow or comprehend, because, you know, our brain tries to protect ourselves from those kind of, you know, realistic thoughts. We want to think of like the crazy, you know, Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, yeah, that was human trafficking, but is that what we see here in East Tennessee? No.
No, I kind of, I agree on that note, in the sense that we want to be able to clearly identify the monster behind the curtain. We want to be able to clearly identify who is really at fault, and we don't want to come to terms with the fact that it's not some big person that we're trying to take down. It's any everyday Joe or Jane or whatever.
And I'm sure that, like, those instances of the pizza thing, I'm sure there's something shady happening.
Right. Yeah.
But is that what we're seeing with human trafficking? No.
I mean, yeah.
As soon as like a hashtag comes out or whatnot, we get an influx of calls of saying, well, this is what human trafficking is. I'm like, you know, I appreciate that you're being a vigilant advocate, but is that what we're really seeing? So that, I mean, our training numbers have definitely gone up in the past couple months, just with, you know, what's happening, the whole, you know, Save Our Children hashtag. Yeah, we want to save the children for sure, but it's like, you know, is that hashtag really going with what we're seeing? So I think social media is great, but also can be very dangerous in misinforming the public. And, you know, sometimes it's easier to just watch a 30-second TikTok video and be like, oh, I feel like I know what human trafficking is. I mean, for me, I'm learning things every day, and I've been here since January. So it's frustrating, but I do appreciate the fact that people, you know, people care. But we just need to kind of turn them around and be like, this is what it actually looks like, not that.
And I see McKenna has a question, maybe.
Yeah, so I was just wondering, if you do come across someone who is a possible victim of human trafficking, do you call the human trafficking hotline, or do you call like 911?
I would call the human trafficking hotline, because unfortunately not everyone that does answer the operator might not be, you know, informed of what to do. So definitely want to call. I mean, if there's something happening right then and there that, like, someone is being beaten or something, like, you know, needs immediate assistance, definitely call 911. And that's why we also do trainings for law enforcement, so that when an officer does come up to that situation, he's going to know what to do, what to ask, to make sure that that person is safe, and that he directs that person to whatever resources or assistance that they need. But if it's something just kind of like an irky feeling, I would definitely call the hotline, say, this is what I'm seeing. Maybe if you have a conversation, that person's like, I'm in a situation where I can't get out, or, you know, said things like that, call our hotline. You know, we have our director of youth services. It's wonderful. She travels to all of East Tennessee. So if they can't come to us, then for minors, she can go to them and help them out. But definitely call. I mean, it's not bad if you call 911. If it's that, like, immediate, like, need of assistance, someone's getting beaten, or they're, you know, say that they're going to be, like, taken from one city to another. Yes, call 911 for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Great question. All right. And then can you type up that app you were talking about? Is it something to work free? I'm not sure if I heard it right.
Yeah.
And we'll pass it out. And this was recorded as well. We're not gonna, you know, okay, perfect. Free to work. That's what it is. Okay.
Oh, I did it properly. Sorry. I hate Zoom.
No, you're fine. I just want to make sure that if anybody else wanted to download it or pass it on, and we can let students know what it is too, in case they missed it. And
Yeah, and I think there's other apps too. I mean, but I think like now, that it's more discussed that there are more apps, which is great. So just even doing research, like, maybe that that $10 shirt is $10 for a reason. Even though I love me a good $10 shirt, but that's one way we can try to prevent it happening from at least overseas, not contributing to it.
Absolutely. Well, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for all of your time and for sticking around a little bit later as well.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, my microphone. These AirPods are not cool. They prevented me from hearing you all. But yeah, if y'all have any questions or want to do another different training, we can do a bit more of a deeper training. It might be a little bit darker because we'll get really into details of like examples and victim profiles. We can definitely do that. I know you or Jillian can request that, and we do it via Zoom. Zoom has been my best friend since March doing these trainings, so let me know.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Well, you all have a great Wednesday.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.